Now, in the previous lessons, we talked about the trig ratios in the first lesson. We talked about in the second lesson how to find the side lengths of the triangle. Now, today what we're going to work on is finding the angle measure. Given two sides of a triangle, how can we find that angle measure? Now, what we're going to study today is just using right triangles to solve this. Now, when doing this, we will use the trig ratios again, the sine, the cosine, and the tangent. Now, this big star that you see is something that you want to definitely take note of and write into your notes, because you're going to have to use a function on your calculator called sine inverse, cosine inverse, and tan inverse to find the angle measures. So make sure you have that written down in your notes. So let's work through the first problem so that we can see exactly what we're going to be doing. Let me scroll down here so we can see everything in one slide. Now, what we're going to do is we are going to take and find out what the angle measure is. Now, again, from this angle measure, we look here and we have the opposite, we have the adjacent, and always across from the right angle is our hypotenuse. So, when we look at this from that angle measure, the numbers that are given to us are which trig function? That would be the tangent function, because we have the opposite and the adjacent side numbers given to us. So, what are we going to do now? Well, we're going to solve through our problem to find that x value and find our angle value. So, to do this, well, we said we're going to use the tangent, so we take the tan from our angle measure. We don't know that angle measure, that's x degrees. And its opposite, our opposite side length is 7, and our adjacent side length is 5. Now, that looks kind of weird. We're like, well, where are we going to go from here? Well, this is where we use the inverse. The inverse, so we're going to take the tan inverse. And to find this on your calculator, because I'm going to be using the computer calculator, is usually you will have the tan button, and right above the tan button you'll see tan inverse. So to get that, you would hit your second function key on your calculator and then push the tan button, which would give you your tan inverse. So to find this out, we take the tan inverse of 7 over 5, 7/5, and that will give our x degrees. So I'm going to pop up the calculator from the computer, and here you see we have an inverse button right underneath the degrees. So on this calculator, what I have to type in is 7 divided by 5. I have to hit equals on that, and then I hit inverse and tan inverse, and that gives me an angle measure, or in degrees, of 54.46 degrees. So my answer here is x degrees is 54.46 degrees. So, recapping it, remember, to find our angle measures, we have to use that inverse key. We're going to go through 2 more examples to make sure that we're good with this before moving on to your assessment from QuizStar. Now, remember, what trig function is the ratio of sides from that x degree angle? Well, right angle always gives us our hypotenuse. Is the 4 adjacent next to the x, or is it opposite across from the x? Well, it's adjacent, it's next to it. So we have our adjacent and hypotenuse, so that's going to be our cosine function. So our cosine from x degrees, our ratio there is 4 divided by 11. So remember, what do we have to use? We have to use the inverse. So the cosine inverse of 4 divided by 11 equals our x degrees. So x degrees is going to equal, well, let's go back to our calculator. Let me clear out what we had from our previous answer. I'm going to take 4 divided by 11. It equals, go to inverse, so you would hit second on your calculator and hit your cosine button, which would give you your inverse. And we have 68.676. Since I'm wanting to go to 2 decimals, I'm going to make that 68.68. And that's in degrees. Excellent job. So that triangle, if we have a side length of 4 for one leg and our hypotenuse is 11, then that angle measure there in between those two sides must be 68.68 degrees. Now, on this one, take a minute, hit pause. What trig function do you need to use for the ratio of sides of side length 9 and side length 13 from the angle measure of x? Hit pause now, work through it, and let's check our work. All right, now let's check our work on this. From our x degrees, from x, our hypotenuse is always across from our right angle, and across the 9 here is opposite of that x, so that's our opposite side length. So opposite and hypotenuse is going to be sine. So our sine from that angle measure, we don't know that angle measure, so it's x degrees, equals 9 divided by 13. To find that degrees, remember we use the inverse, so that's not the sine inverse of 9 over 13 is going to equal x degrees. X degrees is going to be, going to our calculator, let me clear out our last answer, 9 divided by 13 equals, hit your second button, find your sine, and hit equals, and we get 43.18 degrees. Excellent job. Excellent. Hopefully you got that same answer as I did. If not, check your work and see where you possibly made a mistake. Now a recap. What exactly did we do here? Well, we use the sine inverse, the cosine inverse, or the tangent inverse to find our angle measures. Now remember, in order to do that, you still have to use your sine, cosine, and tangent ratio of sides. So we're still using so, ca, so. Now, let's take one step further, and let's compare and contrast the past 2 lessons, finding our side lengths and finding our angle measures. Well, what's similar of those is they both use right triangles. Okay. Now, what else do you think those use? They also use our trig ratios. Okay, remember, sine of theta or x is opposite over our hypotenuse. Our cosine from x or theta is adjacent over hypotenuse. And our tangent from our angle measure is opposite over adjacent. Okay. Now, what is going to be different? Well, these are in boxes because we're not talking about overlap. We're talking about where are they different. Remember, if we're trying to find the missing side length, we just use sine, cosine, and tangent, and we solve for our missing side. When we're talking about finding our missing angle measure, we'll use our inverses, sine inverse, cosine inverse, and tangent inverse. So when we're looking for angle measures, we use the inverse of our trig functions. Great job. Again, go on to Quizstar, log in, take your assessment over finding the missing angle measures. Remember, you have 1 hour to complete the quiz or the assessment, and then you have 10 tries to make that 100. Great job. Good luck on your assessment.